The Lord be with you.
And also with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus again in reply spoke to the chief priests and elders of the people in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. He dispatched his servants to summon the invited guests to the feast, but they refused to come. A second time he sent other servants, saying, 'Tell those invited, behold, I have prepared my banquet. My calves and fatted cattle are killed, and everything is ready. Come to the feast.' Some ignored the invitation and went away, one to his farm, another to his business. The rest laid hold of his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged and sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The feast is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy to come. Go out, therefore, into the main roads, and invite to the feast whomever you find.' The servants went out into the streets and gathered all they found, bad and good alike, and the hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to meet the guests, he saw a man there not dressed in a wedding garment. The king said to him, 'My friend, how is it that you came in here without a wedding garment?' But he was reduced to silence. Then the king said to his attendants, 'Bind his hands and feet and cast him into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Many are invited, but few are chosen.' The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The parable of the marriage feast that we heard today is a sort of summary of Jesus' life and his work of salvation that he did. If we think about marriage, what happens in marriage is that a man and a woman are united together. They're bound together so that they're no longer two, but they're one. And in fact, they become one flesh. And they can never be separated by anything except for death. And in a similar way, but even deeper way, Jesus has united us with God. First, in the person of Jesus, we have humanity and divinity. Jesus is true God and true man. And so humanity and divinity are united. And then when we're baptized, we are also united to Jesus' humanity, and through that humanity to the divinity. So we come to share in divinity as well in some way. And then when we receive communion, the Eucharist, the true body and blood of God, of Jesus, then we are also bringing Jesus' flesh into our flesh. So we have a one flesh union with God too, in some way. And this is why the language of the church as the bride and Jesus as the groom is used a lot by St. Paul and church fathers. It's been common for 2,000 years. And everyone is invited to this union with God, this one flesh union. They're all invited to be members of the church. But as the last line of our reading from the gospel today tells us, many are invited, but few are chosen. Because we know from our own lives that many have turned away from God and the salvation he offers them. In our own country, currently 23% of Americans say they have no religion whatsoever. These are the famous nuns, N-O-N-E, not N-U-N. Those are different. But the nuns, 23%, that's almost 1 out of every 4 people has no belief in God. And they're also the fastest growing religious group in the country. And then even of the people who say they are Christians, they profess Christianity in some way, that's still about the low 70%. We all know, or even from the way we have lived in the past, that there's lots of people who say, I am a Christian, and yet their faith doesn't seem to impact their life in any way that you can tell. It doesn't seem like it's really touched them to be a living and vibrant faith. And because so many people in our country and in the world have turned away from God's invitation to union with him, to the wedding banquet, it's unleashed all sorts of misery and pain into our society. And we can see that if we look around at us. 5 minutes of watching the news is enough to convince anyone that there are problems in the world. But we can do something about it. And Our Lady, Mary, gave us a plan of action, so to speak, when she appeared at Fatima in 1917. We just celebrated on Friday the 100th anniversary of the final miracle at Fatima, which is the miracle of the sun. Tens of thousands of people saw the sun dancing around in the sky, and they saw a whole bunch of different colors. It was a great miracle. And before that, Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, several times. And she had several messages for the world. But the key things for us was she wanted us to do 3 things: pray the rosary, pray a lot for sinners, and do penance for them. And she said that if everyone would start doing these 3 things, that the world would experience blessings like it never had before, and it would be an era of peace that we hadn't known before. And she also gave a warning that if we didn't listen to her instructions and we didn't do these 3 things, the world would experience great suffering. She told us, she predicted that World War I, which was occurring in 1917 when she appeared, she said that war would end, but an even worse war would begin during the reign of Pope Pius XI. Well, that happened. That war is World War II, which was far worse than World War I was. She predicted that war, famine, and persecutions of the church would occur, and even more specifically, that Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the church. Well, that certainly happened. We saw in Russia, atheistic communism, which had just taken root, turned out to spread throughout the whole world. And wherever it went, it caused great suffering for the people and a vicious persecution of the church. Everything Mary told us would happen if we didn't listen to her happened. I don't know if you know this, most people don't, but in the 20th century, more Catholics were martyred than in any other century of the church's history, including the great Roman persecutions in the first centuries. In addition to that, hundreds of millions of people died from war and famine, being murdered by their own governments. It's such a large number, in fact, that historians today, they still can't pin it down because it's just too many people to count. It was a tremendous loss of life for no reason, totally avoidable. And today, we see, unfortunately, that the problems of the 20th century seem to have followed us into the 21st. If we look around, we see North Korea and ISIS and Iran, and Russia is once again acting up. And on the domestic front, we see that our culture is increasingly being hostile to Christianity, and it views anyone that holds to traditional Christian teaching with skepticism and suspicion. Things can look a little worrisome. And so what we should do to counteract all this is listen to Our Lady of Fatima. The message she gave us in 1917 applies just as much today as it did then. She told us to pray the rosary, pray a lot for sinners, and do penance for them. And these are things everyone can do, even out in the world with your jobs and your families. You don't have to be a monk. I'm going to guess the vast majority of us probably have a 20-minute period in a car every day where we're driving back and forth from somewhere. That's a prime time to say a rosary. We can all make little prayers throughout the days for sinners. Maybe every time we open a door, we could pray in our heads, Lord, open the hearts of sinners, things like that. Penance can start with very small things, maybe not having milk with our coffee or sugar in our coffee or no butter on our toast, and offering that up for the conversion of the world. And if we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to build up a habit of interceding for all the people around us and for the world around us. And once that habit starts to take root and develop, we'll notice that we ourselves change. Our relationship with God will be enriched and will be deeper, and will also change the world. We can be the ones that ushers in that era of peace that people don't even think is possible anymore. There doesn't need to be war, and the suffering to the scale that there is in this world. And this isn't just some wishful thinking or a pious pipe dream. This is a promise that the Mother of God has made to us. And God keeps his promises. So, all we have to do, pray the rosary, pray a lot for sinners, and do penance for them. Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us.